Diamonds on the Inside by Ben Harper. Our next story, there might be a few small business people who wish they had diamonds. Well, if you speak to any accountant, they'll tell you most businesses fail because of cash flow. If you don't know what that means, it means that the time they wait to get paid is longer than the times that they have available to pay their bills. The net result is that you can be owed money but have no money to pay your weekly expenses like wages and rent, and that's when the trouble starts. Well, at the height of the mining downturn, the world's two biggest miners extended their payment terms out to 60 days. But if the process has any glitches, and it often does, it can quickly become 90 or even 120 days before you get paid for the work you've done. Now, that's a mining example, but it's not just happening in mining. And to talk about the issue, we're joined by Bronwyn Reid from Mining for Business in Emerald. Good morning, Bronwyn.
Good morning, Angus.
How big an issue is this?
Well, Australia has the dubious honour of holding the world record for late payments, with an average of 26.4 days overdue. So, and it's clear daylight to second place, which is Mexico, which is a mere 18.6 days overdue.
Now, looking in central Queensland, I gave this example of mining because mining is a big industry here, and Emerald obviously, has a lot to do with mining. Have you seen that as you said there, 26 days overdue is 26 beyond the agreed term, which might be 30. So we're talking about 60 days for 30 days and maybe 90 days on average if your set term is now 60 days, if that makes sense. But do you think in Emerald it's having a measurable impact on business?
I would absolutely say so, Angus. Combine that with the reluctance of banks to lend to small business, and you've got a severely cash-constrained environment for small businesses. But it's not, as you said, it's not just mining. One of the other biggest offenders is the grocery industry, Coles and Woolworths.
Yeah, okay. Well, I guess a sceptic might say, well, if you don't like the terms of trade with these big businesses, don't do business with them. What would you say to that? I would say to, and I do say to any small business, if you are going to take on contracts with a supermarket or the telecommunications industry apparently isn't all that crash hot in this department either, that you really examine what the payment terms are and make sure that you are prepared for that. By having, making sure you've got working capital in place early, and knowing exactly what resources you're going to need to fulfil your contract. Because typically when a small business gets a contract with a large company, that means a quantum leap in their turnover. So that often means they'll have to hire some more people, perhaps purchase some more equipment, rent a larger office space. And many small businesses go into that without taking the capital requirements for that into account and the working capital requirements. So that would be my advice, is do your homework first. Why would a company want to go to these terms, and does it have a follow-on effect? Why would a big company want to do this? I mean, they're still paying for the service. Why not just pay on a monthly basis, like has always historically, in theory, been the case?
Yeah, for multinational companies and large companies, it's about management of their own cash flow. So, in fact, what some of the large companies do is, Kellogg's is one of these, has just pushed their payment terms out to 120 days, which then allows them to keep the money for longer. So in effect, the small business is acting as a banker to the large business, but then, to add insult to injury, they will then offer the small business finance to keep them going while they're waiting for 120 days for their money.
It seems like an extraordinary situation, and the people most impacted are the least able to fight back. I mean, sometimes business is just law of the jungle. Can you see any solution to it?
Well, just recently, Angus, the Australian Small Business and Family Enterprise Ombudsman's Office, headed by Kate Carnell, has released an inquiry, the results of an inquiry into small business payment terms and times, and that report came out with 10 recommendations for legislation. The three most important ones for me were a call for a maximum payment time, a legislated maximum payment time for business-to-business transactions, a call for all government departments and agencies to have a 15-day payment time, because in all this, government departments figure as well. 20% of the respondents to the Small Business Ombudsman inquiry said that governments were always or frequently late. And the third recommendation that I particularly liked was a recommendation to have a dispute, an affordable dispute settlement process for small businesses, because many small businesses, the imbalance of power is such that they won't take action.
Yeah, and this is the point, I suppose, in the mining sector. People reluctantly accepted it at the height of the downturn because really they had no choice, but it was always, presented as a one-off thing. But you know that sometimes they start off as one-off things. Before you know it, they're just the new standard terms of trade. With all those options, those three options you've given there, they seem incredibly hard to police. Do you think even the government would have the time to police it?
Yes, there's one other recommendation that came up in the inquiry, and that was to have a public register of companies' payment terms and how they are performing against those payment terms. So what a small business could do, going back to your question earlier, is go to that central register, look up the company that they are intending to do business with, see what their payment terms are and how they are performing against those payment terms. So that would be wonderful if we could. So all the small business owners, we need to put pressure on our members of Parliament to make this thing happen.
Yeah, okay. And do you think there's any chance of those recommendations being enabled by government?
Look, I have to be hopeful, Angus, and small businesses have to be hopeful. But as I said, the voice of small business must continue to be heard. I'm not holding my breath because even this payment terms inquiry took a long time in its gestation, and then the inquiry. And the unfair contract provisions, I don't know if the small business unfair contract provisions, that took several years before it finally landed in the legislation just at the end of last year. So it won't be a short road, but I'm hopeful that it will reach a successful conclusion.
Yeah, okay. Fingers crossed for small business owners. Bronwyn, thank you for your time this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks, Angus.